In this video, we're going to go over some changes and some updates to a couple of our favorite charts, the vertical bar chart and the horizontal bar chart. So let's go ahead and start off. This is just your basic vertical bar chart. Now, some things that we do right out of the box and changed on you for the default settings were the colors of the bar are now just a single solid color. And you need to go in and change to a palette if you want to use a palette, and we'll look at that here in a second. Also, we've removed the borders of the bars by default. So if you want borders on the bars, you need to go and add those in under the styling. So let's take a look at a couple of these changes in the style menu. If we go in there, we can see here now chart colors. We have the single color option and this use palette option. This is to get rid of the need to create a bunch of single color palettes. So one thing that was starting to happen is people wanted single colors, but various colors for a single color on their charts. And then they were having a bunch of single color palettes. And so that didn't really make sense. So now you can come in and you can just change up the color if you have a single color for that. Or if you want a palette, you can go and switch to a palette. Let's go back to the single color because that's what we want, and we'll just we'll throw it back into a gray, maybe a darker gray. Okay, again, you can swap out your palettes if you want, so those changes haven't affected anything. So just trying to make it easier straight out of the box from a color perspective to use. Now, we've also added some changes to the axis labels here. So if you go in and go into your data labels, you have always had the ability to turn on and off labels here, but it required you to turn off both X and Y axis. Now you can turn off the X axis or the Y axis independently. I do have the values turned on here, but you can still turn those off. So it makes it a little bit easier to style things. Now, one thing to point out is that the axis itself and the data values on those axes are separate. So if we go in here, if you go into axis line, again, we used to have this display axis option, which required you to turn off both axes, but you can turn off them independently here. So for example, in this case, I already have the data values here. I may want to turn off the y-axis line and the labels so I can get a cleaner look. Not something I really like, but it would get a cleaner look if I just wanted the data values here and no y-axis. Let's go turn those back on because I actually do like those on the vertical bar chart. So those are some of the things that we've updated here that have allowed you to have more control over how things are done. Now, one of the things that you may also see here, let's go ahead and go over to our horizontal bar. Now, the horizontal bar has many of the same options that you just saw on the vertical bar. In fact, on this one, it actually kind of does make sense on the horizontal bar to clean it up a little bit. And I just have the data values here and the x-axis removed. But one of the things here is we can see that we have both, these are not in order, so they're kind of out of order. And two, I don't really like the labels here. So maybe I want to change those labels. If I go in and we go into the data labels again, we now have the ability to do override. So instead of 3-moderate, maybe I just want moderate. And I'll do one more just so we can see that. So I want critical. And then I can change each of those as I see fit. So let's go ahead and close that. And you can see it changes there. Now to change the order, the feature we've had for a while is this custom sort. So I can turn on custom sort and then I can order those. Let's go ahead and do that because it makes sense to have these listed in order that way. Yeah, so you can see we have critical, high, etc. So that's something that we've had in the past, but now you can override labels, which is another way to just customize the visual that you want. Okay, so let's do Let's go one more. Now, here's something that we haven't allowed in the past, and that is visualizing negative values. Before, if you had negative values, it would just, the chart ended at 0 and we didn't visualize actually the negative value. In this case, I have data coming in. I have January revenue, January expenses, February revenue, February expenses. We allow you to visualize both positive and negative numbers. This is on the vertical and horizontal bar. So that's been taken care of. Now, one thing we had to add in order for this to work out well is this new label margin option. So if we go back here and we just say 0, which is the default on the label margin, you can see when we do negative values, we actually, our data labels for that bar start to overlap things. So we can go in there and we can add a little bit more margin on the bars so that we can have space for our labels to be added into the visual. So now we get a nice buffer on both the positive and negative values. One other thing we added was the ability to do a contains conditional coloring. So what does that mean? In this case, if we go into style and we go to conditional colors, we've had conditional colors as one on both of these bar charts in the past. However, we didn't have a contains. So if you went into conditional, I have this revenue condition set up already, so I'm going to open it up and edit it. You can see I labeled it revenue, and if it contains in the name and the word revenue. So in the past, what you would actually have to do is you would have to go in and you would have to create a condition that would be equal to then January revenue, and then I have to go create one that would be equal to February revenue. As you can imagine, if you have a whole year, having to do that for every month would get a little cumbersome. So now we can just do a contains, and so if the name contains, and I put in the value there, revenue, we change the color of that bar to this nice green color because we're making money, and then it shows it there. So again, in just one condition setup, I can now have all of my revenue bars positive, so all my money making bars are positive and green, and all my money spending bars are gray and negative. So again, a lot of flexibility here, both in the vertical and horizontal bar chart, to continue making the visual that you want for your data. So hopefully these changes are things that will help you in your use of these two charts, and I look forward to seeing what you create.